Paul Newman exposed the 5 actors Hollywood was terrified of. Those blue eyes saw everything. Throughout his decades in Hollywood, Paul Newman worked alongside the industry's biggest stars, observing the machinery of fame from the inside. While cameras captured the glamour and talent, Newman witnessed what happened when those cameras stopped rolling. Paul kept a mental list, revealed a longtime friend who worked with Newman on multiple films. There were actors everyone in Hollywood feared, not just disliked or found difficult, but genuinely feared. The ones who could empty a room just by walking in. The ones who made experienced directors nervously check the exits. Unlike many stars who carefully maintained Hollywood's code of silence, Newman occasionally shared unfiltered observations with trusted colleagues about the industry's most intimidating figures. These weren't stories about typical Hollywood egos or creative temperaments, but about men whose behavior crossed lines into genuinely concerning territory. Tonight we reveal the 5 actors who earned places on Newman's private list of Hollywood's most feared figures, the men whose volatile personalities, unpredictable behavior, and capacity for both professional and physical intimidation created an atmosphere of genuine apprehension throughout the industry. Let's begin with the actor whose cold detachment and unpredictable outbursts made him a particular kind of Hollywood hazard, someone whose talent was matched only by his complete disregard for industry norms and basic professional courtesy. Burdened by the people with whom I work and how with the grips and the juicers like Robert Mitchum, the cold indifference. On screen, Robert Mitchum projected a captivating blend of danger and cool detachment that made him perfect for film noir and westerns. Off-screen, that detachment transformed into something colleagues found genuinely unsettling, a profound indifference to both professional standards and human connection that created an atmosphere of unpredictability on his sets. Cool on screen, cold in person, observed director Sidney Pollack, who discussed Mitchum with Newman during their collaboration on Absence of Malice. Paul had worked near Mitchum on a lot in the early days, and what struck him wasn't Mitchum's temper, though that could be explosive, but his fundamental disconnection from normal human concerns, the complete absence of worry about consequences. This disconnection manifested in Mitchum's notorious unreliability. He would show up to sets intoxicated, miss days of filming without explanation, or deliberately undermine directors' instructions, not from active malice but from what appeared to be a genuine indifference to the collaborative process of filmmaking. Mitchum didn't care about anyone or anything, noted a production manager who worked on several Mitchum films. It wasn't that he was deliberately trying to cause problems, it was that he genuinely didn't register other people's needs or concerns as relevant to his decisions. That created a kind of unpredictability that everyone from directors to fellow actors found extremely difficult to navigate. The unpredictability occasionally escalated beyond professional challenges into genuinely concerning behavior. Mitchum's volatile moods could shift without warning, sometimes resulting in physical confrontations with crew members who crossed him, often over seemingly minor issues that wouldn't trigger such reactions from other actors. He showed up drunk, threatened directors, and once headbutted a crew member for giving him line notes, said a script supervisor who witnessed several of these incidents. What made it particularly unnerving was the casualness of it. There wasn't the buildup of anger you'd see with other volatile actors. Mitchum could be calmly discussing a scene one moment and physically intimidating someone the next, with no apparent emotional shift between the states. Newman's own assessment of Mitchum, shared with colleagues after observing his behavior on neighboring sets, focused on this emotional disconnection rather than specific incidents. He recognized in Mitchum something beyond the typical difficult star, someone whose fundamental relationship to other people created unpredictable danger. He wasn't violent to be macho, he just had no use for people, Newman reportedly told a co-star after witnessing one of Mitchum's confrontations with a director. Paul made an important distinction there, the co-star later explained. He understood that Mitchum's behavior wasn't about establishing dominance or reputation like some Hollywood tough guys. It came from this deeper place of genuine disconnection, which made it both more authentic and more concerning. This assessment aligned with Mitchum's own public statements about his approach to both acting and life. He famously dismissed his profession as requiring less skill than ditch digging and maintained a public persona built around indifference to Hollywood's typical measures of success. What appeared as refreshing honesty in interviews translated to concerning unreliability in professional contexts. Actors respected his talent, but nobody wanted to share a set with him twice concluded a casting director who worked during Mitchum's era. That was the ultimate measure of how difficult he was. In an industry where connections and relationships drive careers, the fact that even directors who praised his performances would actively avoid working with him again spoke volumes about the experience of having him on set. Newman's assessment of Mitchum reflected his broader philosophy about professional behavior, that talent never justified mistreating others, and that the collaborative nature of filmmaking required a basic respect for the process that Mitchum's indifference fundamentally undermined. I'd probably just slowly sprang. Wallace Beery, the menacing presence. Unlike Mitchum's cold detachment, Wallace Beery presented a different kind of Hollywood terror, a calculated cruelty directed particularly toward those with less power, combined with a public persona carefully crafted to mask his off-camera behavior. This gap between image and reality made him especially dangerous in Newman's assessment. Golden Age icon and an absolute nightmare off-camera, said a film historian who documented Newman's rare comments about Hollywood's past. What Paul found particularly disturbing about Beery wasn't just specific incidents, but the systematic nature of his behavior, how he would deliberately target those least able to defend themselves while maintaining a carefully constructed public image of lovable gruffness. This targeting was most evident in Beery's treatment of child actors, women, and lower-level crew members, those with minimal industry protection or whose careers could be most easily damaged by challenging a star of his stature. Multiple accounts from his productions describe patterns of verbal abuse, intimidation, and occasionally physical aggression. Beery was a known bully, especially to child actors and women, confirmed Jackie Cooper, who worked with Beery as a child on The Champ, and later discussed those experiences with Newman. Paul was particularly concerned about how the studio system had enabled and covered for Beery's behavior, creating a situation where vulnerable people had nowhere to turn when subjected to his abuse. This institutional protection extended beyond managing Beery's on-set behavior to potentially covering up more serious incidents. The most notorious of these involved persistent rumors about Beery's possible connection to the death of Three Stooges founder Ted Healy, who died following a confrontation outside the Trocadero nightclub in 1937. Rumors swirled for decades that he was involved in the death of Ted Healy, founder of the Three Stooges, noted a researcher who tracked these allegations. While never proven, these rumors reflected the industry's understanding of Beery's capacity for violence and the studio's ability to manage potential scandals involving valuable stars through their connections with law enforcement and the press. Newman's assessment of Beery came not from personal interaction, but from conversations with older actors and crew members who had worked with him directly. These first-hand accounts painted a consistent picture of someone whose public charm masked a private cruelty that created genuine fear among those forced to work with him. You could feel the room change when he walked in. The air got heavier, Newman reportedly observed after hearing multiple accounts of Beery's on-set behavior. This comment reflected Paul's understanding that Beery's impact wasn't just about specific incidents, but about creating an atmosphere of constant anxiety, where everyone was perpetually braced for his next outburst or targeted cruelty. What particularly concerned Newman about figures like Beery was how their behavior had been normalized and protected by the studio system, establishing patterns that would continue to influence industry culture long after Beery himself had left the scene. The gap between public persona and private behavior represented for Newman one of Hollywood's most fundamental and damaging deceptions. Newman saw in Beery an early template for how the industry would manage difficult stars, explained a colleague who discussed Hollywood history with Newman. The public image carefully constructed to hide problematic behavior, the studio protection that insulated stars from consequences, the expectation that others would simply endure abuse as part of the price of working in film. These patterns established during Beery's era continued to shape Hollywood long after his death. This historical perspective informed Newman's own approach to stardom, his deliberate creation of working environments characterized by mutual respect, his refusal to participate in the star system's more exploitative aspects, and his consistent treatment of crew members as valued collaborators rather than disposable support staff. Is my business, at midnight is my beat, and it takes me to the real story behind 1,000 front. Sterling Hayden, the volatile force. Standing 6 feet 5 inches with a commanding physical presence, Sterling Hayden brought an authentic intensity to his film roles that few actors could match. That same intensity, however, extended beyond the cameras in ways that made him one of Hollywood's most physically intimidating